So today we are picking back up our series through 1 Timothy. We've been working through this for a couple months, maybe longer, but we've had to take several breaks throughout it. But it looks like before Christmas we will finish, because we have this one section of chapter 5, and then we got chapter 6, which will be a couple different sermons, and then that'll wrap up 1 Timothy for us. And I've really enjoyed going through this. It's encouraged me, challenged me a lot, and I pray and hope that it has done the same for you. But we will find today a subject that Paul brings up that he's already brought up 2 times before, and that has to do with good leadership, leading well, leaders in the church. He opened the book talking about the dangers of bad leaders, ones that teach things that contradict the gospel or behave in a way that contradicts the gospel. And then he goes on in chapter 3 and he talks about, okay, now that we've talked a little bit about what makes a leader a bad leader, let's talk about good leaders. And we find, we're not going to go back and review all the verses again, but there were 3 areas where leaders were meant to be in positions where they were shining lights to the Christian community. Good examples. One is in their doctrine and teaching. They taught things that lined up with what the Bible said. Another thing was leading their families well. They were good spouses and good fathers. That was the other marker. And then the other marker was how they just conducted themselves in the world around them. Although they weren't called to be perfect, you should be able to notice that their life is completely different than the rest of the world. And so those areas they were meant to be leaders in. And then Paul says several things for a while, but then he comes right back and he starts talking about leaders again in chapter 5, verse 17. So I'm just going to read these verses and then go back and look over them with more detail. So it says, "Let the elders who rule well be considered worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in preaching and teaching. For the Scripture says, 'You shall not muzzle an ox when it treads out the grain, and the laborer deserves his wages. Do not admit a charge against an elder except on the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. As for those who persist in sin, rebuke them in the presence of all, so that the rest may stand in fear. In the presence of God and of Christ Jesus and of the elect angels, I charge you to keep these rules without prejudging. Do nothing from partiality. Do not be hasty in the laying on of hands, nor take part in the sins of others. Keep yourself pure. No longer drink only water, but use a little wine for the sake of your stomach and your frequent ailments. The sins of some men are conspicuous, going before them to judgment, but the sins of others appear later. So also good works are conspicuous, and even those that are not cannot remain hidden." Paul is hitting really hard this idea of leaders in the church ought to be leading well, and if they are worthy of honor and respect. And the reason you follow through this whole letter in context and other places where leadership is addressed, the reason this is something hit on so heavily is because a congregation can only be as healthy as its leadership. The spiritual leadership provided by a congregation's leaders will determine the health of that congregation. And a congregation will only go where its leaders are leading it to. And we've already seen that in this church in Ephesus, there were leaders that had made their way in that were teaching things that were against the gospel and living in a way that contradicted the gospel, and it was causing confusion. And Paul used some really strong words calling these guys fakers. They were wrong. You needed to address this, Timothy. You needed to stand up to them. And then he begins to describe what a real leader looks like. That was chapter 3, like we just talked about. And then he gets to this section. He says, listen, if you have leaders that are doing their job well, you should really appreciate that fact, realizing how big of a deal it is to have leaders who are leading well. It does not say those that rule. That's what my translation, the English Standard, the King James also says that. If you have an NIV, it says something like direct the affairs or manage the affairs of the church well. Notice it doesn't just say those who rule or those who manage. It tacks on the end that they got to do it well. And if they do it well, they are worthy of what is called here double honor, especially those who have the burden of preaching the word and teaching the word. Here's something that we need to think about. It's not just the position, not just they're ruling, they're managing, they're in charge. It's not talking about positional leadership where they stand in a position of bark orders at people. Now, we're going to talk about two scenarios. One is what this is not, and then the other is what it is. The word manage well or direct affairs or rule does not mean this. You ever known someone that was a coach or a boss and all they did was just sit there and yell at you about what you ought to be doing? Like maybe you had the coach that never got up off the bench and sat by the water cooler and was like, you need to run faster and you need to block better and you need to get down on the ball more. And you look at him and you're kind of doubting, I don't think this guy could run 40 yards without taking a water break. And here he is yelling at me because he's the coach in a position to do so, right? Or you got that guy at work that walks around and criticizes, you didn't seal that up right, or hey, you're not getting that exactly the way it needs to be, or hey, but you never see them do anything. We're not going to point fingers, but that happens. People are in a position, and either from behind or because they have this position, this positional authority, they bark orders at people, and their idea of leadership is to tell people what to do because they're the boss. That's not what this is talking about. The word to rule well or to direct the affairs of the church well, it implies someone who is intimately involved with the people that are being led. It's the person you think of back to the sports analogy or the workplace analogy. It's the person who played for years and knows the ins and outs of the game so well that they are able from experience to guide you where you need to go. And say, listen, like this is what you need to do because I know why, or they're at work and maybe they got to their position because they literally do know how to do nearly everything on the job site. And because they excelled at it, they were entrusted with this position. And those people lead in a different way. See, theirs isn't a sitting back, barking orders, yelling at people what to do. It is from leading the pack, reaching back, saying, listen, I've been through this and I've learned how to do this. Let me help you get to the next level. That is what this idea of being a leader or a ruler, directing, managing the affairs of the church is all about. It's not the first, barking orders from behind. It's the second, encouraging, blazing the trail, and helping pull people to where they need to go. And leaders that do that well, Paul says, are worthy of a double honor. The first honor is acknowledging, thank you for doing what you do. God bless you for doing what you do, and making their job easy, not a burden. All right? But then he goes on and talks about what's the double honor. That's one honor. The other is that those that actually dedicate their entire life to the service of ministry and kingdom work, it is fitting and appropriate that they be compensated so that they can live, so that they can focus 100% on kingdom work. It is okay that they get paid to do so. And Paul quotes two different passages from the law explaining why this is the case. He says, look, the ox should not be muzzled while he's treading out the grain, and the laborer is worthy of his wages. His point being is that the person in leadership in the church that is carrying the load of preaching and teaching, they're the ox that's treading the grain that you shouldn't muzzle. They're the worker that is deserving of wages. And his point is not that you should be in Christian ministry so you can get rich. He deals with that later, okay? There's been a bad taste put in people's mouths over the years because you've had those people, send me $30 and I will pray for you and you will walk again, and people hear that and it puts a really bad taste in their mouth. Or you get people who really do view Christian ministry as an opportunity to drive better cars and get bigger houses and get ahead of everybody. And unfortunately that happens. Paul deals with that later, okay? Now he's only making the point. Don't let the negative people take away from the fact that it's appropriate and okay for someone to be able to be in full-time ministry and be supported by the people that he serves. That's okay, all right? But then he goes on and he brings out something that's really interesting. Do not admit a charge against an elder except on the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. That was verse 19. Then verse 20. As for those who persist in sin, rebuke them in the presence of all so that the rest may stand in fear. If you have good leaders, double honor. It's such a blessing because a church is only as healthy as its leadership, and a church can only go where its leaders are taking it to, right? But if you have those that are confusing the flock by the way that they live or the things that they teach, they have to be dealt with. No leader is above accountability. In God's church, there's accountability for everyone. There is no such thing as being at such a high position that no one can call you into account for your actions. Now, there's 2 safeguards here. One is because Christians get targeted sometimes and people don't like our message, potentially people can try to fabricate things to blame a Christian leader for doing, to try to discredit their ministry. That has happened before. And so, in these verses we just read, the point is made, listen, only take a charge against an elder seriously if there are 2 or 3 witnesses. It can't be hearsay. It can't be gossip. It can't be, well, I think old Aunt Sally's mad that we threw the hymn book out and she's trying to get the preacher's head, so she comes up, well, he was mean to me at the dinner, you know. There has to be real substantial moral or doctrinal things going on that can be substantiated by 2 or 3 witnesses. Yes, he did X, Y, or Z. We saw it, we experienced it. And if that is found out, a person in leadership position in a church, if they are found to be living immorally or teaching false doctrine, what does it say that Timothy is supposed to do with these guys? Pat them on the back and say, good luck next time? No, I'm going to read this again because it's like, whoa, man. He says, Paul instructs Timothy, he says, as for those who persist in sin, so those that after they're talked to, they just keep on sinning, rebuke them in the presence of everybody. This is a public thing. They're to be brought forward before the congregation and say, this person was set forward as a leader in our church family. They were to be an example in their moral life and in their doctrine. But they use that position in a way to confuse everybody, so realize this person is not someone you should listen to. Man, could you imagine that actually happened in one of our churches in 21st century America? Sometimes it does, but that's a scary thing to think about. Like those of us that are in positions of Christian ministry and leadership positions, it's like, yikes, you know, or keep your nose clean. But the point in doing that isn't to bully or to be mean to anybody. The point of it is that people are led astray. People may lose faith or stumble in their faith. People get a distorted view of God and of the Lord and how to be a Christian when they see purported leaders in the church doing bad stuff and teaching bad stuff. A lot's at stake. And when someone who claims to be leading people in the Lord is living a life of immorality or teaching false doctrine, souls are at stake, and a church is to take its mission so seriously that when someone in this position is found to be contradicting the message of Christ, they are to be publicly rebuked. Now, this doesn't mean they can't be saved or they're kicked out of the church yet. That may happen at some point. But what it does mean is that they are dismissed as being held up as an example of Christian ministry. Brother Joe Schmo over here made a mistake. He is not in leadership anymore. He repents. There we go. He's brought back to the life of the church. He can worship. He can be part of the church. But he cannot be a leader in the church again because that causes so much confusion to the unbelieving world on one hand and to Christians on the other. And depending upon the magnitude of the sin and the brokenness and the fallout of it, sometimes they've got to be dismissed from the church completely. Why these extreme measures? Again, because a congregation can only be as healthy as its leadership is healthy and can only go where its leadership is leading it. Now, look at verse 21. Now, this is a hard one, all right? I mean, that other verse is pretty tough. But I don't like arguing with people. I do. My wife loves to argue with people, but Just kidding. I just said that because she's sitting right there and I'll hear about that one later. All right. No, I'm just kidding. My wife is awesome. I know she's the real reason y'all keep me around. I know that. I can accept that. I can live with that. But this is what Paul tells Timothy. In the presence of God. Now remember what he just said. If there's a charge against a leader, take it seriously if there are 2 or 3 witnesses. Well, now Paul calls out 3 witnesses to command Timothy what he needs to do. And look at the list of these witnesses. I, in the presence of God and of Christ Jesus and of the elect angels, I charge you to keep these rules without prejudging, doing nothing from partiality. It says, listen, you can't just wink an eye when people in leadership are doing what they're not supposed to do. You got to do something about it. And it doesn't matter. There's 2 extremes. One is you don't really like a guy. That's the prejudging part. You're like, that dude gets on my nerves. All right, he messed up. We can get him out. Woohoo! I've been waiting for that. That's prejudging. That's wrong. Can't do that. But then on the other side, that's my buddy. We like to go fishing together, and, we've known each other for a long time, and can't we just kind of pretend like that didn't happen? You can't do that either. No partiality. It has nothing to do with likes or dislikes or friendship or not friendship. It is rooted in the truth of the Word of God. And people in Christian leadership have to hold other leaders accountable to that unchanging truth. Something has to be done when people in positions of leadership are reflecting Christ poorly, because the entire church's health and mission is at stake. And this isn't an optional thing. Remember, Paul says to Timothy, I charge you in the presence of God and Jesus Christ Himself and all the elect angels, whatever they are, I don't know, but if they're watching, you better do it. Keep this command without prejudging or partiality. You see how big of a deal this is? This is some heavy stuff. Leaders in the church are given a tremendous responsibility, and they are accountable to other leaders in the church. No one is above accountability. Verse 22, do not be hasty in the laying on of hands, nor take part in the sins of others. Keep yourself pure. Well, laying on of hands is what was done to commission someone to leadership or to a ministry. And Paul's saying, listen, don't be obsessed with filling a spot. If they're not qualified, they don't go in the spot. We need to be affirming those that God has called and equipped for the position. Here's what this looks like. So often churches scattered throughout our whole country, like, well, it tells us in our bylaws and constitution that we have to have this position and that teacher, and we got to have this field. And so in order to get that done, we just throw people in the slot. And as long as they get the yes vote, they're in the spot. Well, that's what Paul's warning against here. He's saying, don't be hasty in appointing people to positions of leadership. Because if you do and they mess up, guess who's accountable for what they did? It says, you shared in their sins. The situation we read of in the Scriptures is that leaders, go back to chapter 3, are to be of the most mature people in the church, leading the congregation. And they are the ones who filter and decide the next generations of leaders coming up. It is built on who God equips and calls. And if it can be affirmed that someone is living a life consistent with the gospel, we go and look at 1 Timothy 3, we look at Titus, we see a description of what a leader in the church should look like, and if someone is in that position where they qualify and they have that calling in their life, we affirm what God has already done. We can't just fill a position. And Timothy probably was running behind in leaders. He maybe was short on leaders because he's having to remove people that were teaching bad things or living a bad way. And he may have been tempted to be like, well, I need to fill these positions. And Paul said, don't get too quick on that because so much is at stake. Because a congregation's only as healthy as its leadership is healthy. And it can only go where its leadership is leading it to go. So you need to make sure you get the right people in the right spot. It's not about filling a slot. It's about letting God build the team and allowing Him the space that He needs to bring people into the positions that a congregation needs to have. No longer, is verse 23, no longer drink only water, but use a little wine for the sake of your stomach and your frequent ailments. Now, does anybody else find that to be somewhat random and weird, just plugged into this paragraph? We're talking about leadership and how important leadership is, and about how no leader's above accountability, and we need to make sure that the leaders are doing what they're supposed to be doing for the health of the church. And then right after this verse, he talks about people that are living sinful lives, it will be told on them, and likewise righteous things will be seen. And then right here in the middle, by the way, Timothy, have a glass of wine. Maybe Timothy's getting sweaty and stressed out about all. He's like, oh, I got to do what? And he's like, whew, I need something. Maybe, probably not. Tell you what I think is going on, and this is subject, if y'all got a better idea, let me know. But based on reading and researching this a lot and praying about it, it seems as if what Paul is speaking about in this verse actually lines up quite nicely with everything else that he's saying. It's talking about good leaders and how they are worthy of double honor. Got to hold them accountable, though. And then there's bad leaders that you got to watch out for, which is what makes good leaders so important, right? Likely, these bad leaders were practicing a form of asceticism, that is refraining from certain activities or foods or different things, to try to be real Christians. Paul ran into these kinds of people all through his ministry. Nearly every letter he wrote deals with this kind of thing, where you had people saying, yeah, Jesus is good, but you got to follow Jesus and be circumcised, and observe special days, and eat kosher food. And Paul was like, no. All that is done away with in Christ. Following Christ is what matters. There's an interesting passage in Colossians chapter 2 where Paul is dealing with false teachings that the Colossian church was dealing with. And when you get to that section where Paul deals with their false teaching, he says, listen, why are you Colossian Christians putting up with this false asceticism that can do nothing to promote godliness? All it is making things hard for your body. They say things like don't taste, don't touch, don't, and he's like, why are you worried about stuff that once you consume it, it goes away? Which is reflective of what Jesus said when he said, all foods are clean because in the eating it goes into the toilet. He said that. The point that Paul is making is, listen, you may be tempted, Timothy, because of the pressure of these false teachers to practice this really strict diet that likely included not eating meat, not drinking wine. And Paul said, why? You know these people are full of it. Don't listen to anything they say. God has blessed you and your ministry. Eat what you need to eat. And if you need to drink something other than just water, don't listen to the aesthetics. Drink a glass of wine and don't be worried about it. It's fine. Now, I don't want to get real deep into this because it's a side issue. Realize that the wine and its alcoholic content is very much a side point. The point is that some people feel pressured to live out a certain list that are man-made and don't even come from Scripture. And they feel like as long as I keep this list, I'm good. And Paul said, don't even fool with that. The Bible clearly teaches that alcoholism, that being addicted to much wine, we saw in chapter 3, drunkenness is a sin, it's condemned. Flat out says, don't do that, it's bad. But it never outright condemns alcohol, it just doesn't. But how many Christians have on their list over here, I'm a better Christian than you because I'm a teetotaler. It's like, it's not even God's list, get over it. Just saying, all right? And so Paul challenges Timothy to say, look, don't let these guys pressure you to do what they're doing. You live for God. And so this is him attacking a little bit these false teachers and their false teaching. And then in verses 24, 25, he says, the sins of some men are conspicuous, they're evident, they're plain to see, they're obvious. They go before them to judgment, but the sins of others appear later. There are some people, they're like this old coonhound dog I had named Hank. He wasn't a good coonhound, but he was a good skunk dog. He every time we'd turn him loose, you'd hear him, oh, he's struck. I mean, he's on a trail, right? He was, but he'd get a skunk, and you could smell him coming. You could smell that dude from a quarter mile away. Some of us, hopefully not, but have a potential to stink to high heaven when it comes to our moral life. We're supposed to be reflecting Jesus, But we're chasing everything but Jesus. And for some people, the stench of sin in the world is so strong on them that it's obvious that, yeah, they say, I'm a Christian, I go to church. But the way they treat people, the way they talk about people, the way they conduct their moral lives day by day, the things that they teach other people to do stinks to high heaven. Paul says, some sin's obvious, and you can see it from a mile away. But others, it kind of trails behind them. They're sneaky. They can cram it into their pockets, and they can hide it in their backpacks, and they can talk the talk and walk the walk. This is what Jesus called wolves in sheep's clothing. They look good on the outside, but inwardly, they're full of dead men's bones. But Paul says, look, all sin will be found out. It will come to a head. It will be known and it will be seen. But Paul hates to leave off on a negative note. So he follows up the next sentence and he says, yeah, and righteous works are the same way. Good deeds also. Some people are just exploding with good works. It's like a perfume or a cologne that just oozes out of them. You're like, they follow Jesus. But then there's also those that are more behind the scenes kind of people. They do things, you don't see them, they're not as visible, but the more that you get to know them and the more you learn about what's going on, you're like, I see what they've been doing. In any case, a tree is known by its fruit. In any case, you will see and it will be made manifest what a person is in here, because eventually it comes out here or they do something. We've talked a lot about leadership today because that's the main point of this section. Because Paul is driving home to the point of it being almost obnoxious, trying to get us to wrestle with this through this letter, that a church is only as healthy as its leaders are healthy. And a church can only go where its leaders are leading it to. Therefore, be careful with your leaders. Hold them accountable, but realize that if they're doing their job well, make their job easier. Honor them. Help them to do what God's called them to do. But here's the thing, for all of us, most sitting here listening to this today will not find themselves in positions of Christian authority in the church. You will not find yourself an elder one day. Most of you will not. Some will, but most won't. But all of us have influence. And leadership is at its core and heart about influence. And God has put people in your life for you to influence for Jesus. And these principles for leaders who are in charge of guiding an entire church family, it's also something that individually we can apply to our influence with others. We got to realize, like those last two verses, the way that we live matters. It either reflects Jesus or it clouds the picture of Jesus. Either we stink to high heaven with claims of, Jesus is great, but we're living like the devil, and we stink like old Hank the Coonhound skunking it up everywhere. That, or the way that we live is reflective of the fact that Christ is our King and our Lord, and we care about what He cares about. Does that mean we're going to be perfect? No. But it's the consistency, the daily walk of life. But here's the thing, that's hard, isn't it? There is so much pressure, there's so much influence, there's so much that is fighting against us. Just like leadership needs accountability, all of us need accountability too. We need people in our lives that can help us. But, you don't smell too good today. Not being judgmental, not being mean, not being like, I'm a better Christian than you, because, that's not the point. The point is because they care about you and they care about Christ. Instead of barking orders from behind, they come alongside you and say, listen, let me help you get through this. The way you're talking to your wife, the way you're treating your kids, the way that you're kind of cheating on your taxes, we need to talk about that, right? And they come beside you, not in a judgmental fashion, but help you to grow, to take steps closer to Christ. All of us need that in your life. And here's the thing, that's not going to happen coming here 1 hour on a Sunday morning. Our relationships with other Christians must reach further and deeper than that. If you're not already involved in a small group, I encourage you to think about finding one to be a part of. And if you don't do anything official like that, find other Christians that you can pray with through the week. You can make phone calls. Let people have that space in your life where they can help you grow. Accountability is essential, not just for leaders, critically important for leaders, yes, but it's essential for all of us as well. We need to allow ourselves to be accountable to someone. My hope and prayers as a congregation, we can think through that and say, you know what, my faith can't just be a 1-hour Sunday morning thing. It is an everyday walk with the Lord, and I need influence of other Christians in my life holding me accountable through the week. This is me, Kyle, I don't trust myself the whole week to never make a mistake, all right? I just don't. I'll do something dumb, right? Yeah, I will. So I need people in my life saying, are you sure about that? All of us do. The Christian community is not a 1-hour-a-week community. It is a constant, ongoing. And here's the thing, we're going to be together forever. You might as well just get used to it, okay? Here in a moment, we're going to sing a song. That song is meant to be a time of reflection. If you're already a follower of Jesus, how is it that you can bring community with other Christians, that built-in accountability, to the forefront of your life so that you can influence others better for Jesus Christ? But it could be that there's somebody here today that you're not part of God's family yet. You haven't walked the same steps as our sister Brinley just did here. Maybe you think Jesus is a great idea, but you have yet to meet Him where He asked us to meet Him so He can do that great work of giving us a new heart. And if you're at that place where you want to meet Jesus in the waters of baptism, allow Him to bury you with Him and to bring you into a new life, I encourage you to do that as we sing this song.